That's a secret, it's not for the fire department.
Good. Would you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Before we get into public comment, well, actually, are there any additions to the agenda for tonight?
Yes.
What do we have?
I'd like to add the contract for girls to be approved by the board and authorize the mayor to sign a contract with them. That'd be the first one. The second one is authorization for AICP cert for red and white. And the second is, or excuse me, third is approval of street closure for Alton Memorial Library. And then the last would be appointment of Colin Salt as an unpaid intern.
All right. Is there any objection to moving all four of those to the consent agenda?
I don't think the filming can be. It's a contract, and I think we ought to do it by resolution separately.
Other than that?
And Elding is fine as long as Elding fills out the event form that they are required to fill out, which went into effect June 1st.
Colin Salt should get interviewed by the board.
What?
Colin should get interviewed by the board.
He's an unpaid volunteer. He just called that.
I know. So what's the part?
Okay. Is Colin here?
He's here.
Yes.
Hey, oh, good. Colin. All right.
Hi.
Give us a few minutes then.
Yeah, it's
Don't do anything now.
It's just informal. It's very
Jason, are we
So-
acting on the revised contract?
I'm sorry?
What are we doing about the revised contract?
We'll have to talk about that in executive session. It's
Okay.
legal matter.
All right?
And basically, Will is looking into it. Is
Okay.
basically where we're at. So I'll move the AICP certification and the street closure to the consent agenda. Any objections? Okay.
And did we set a date for the amendment that Gren recommended on 212? Have we set a date for that yet? We
No, but
told-
I don't know why.
Why haven't we?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Alberta, will you find out why?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
The hearing that we were supposed to have the last meeting, we had a recommendation from the attorney to pull it off and not have the hearing. I want to know the status of it and where it is.
Should I follow up with you about it today?
It's echoing in the noise and hearing.
We'll try.
All right.
I spoke to the village attorney today regarding the public hearing that did not take place last week, and he said it is not ready to be recommended for public hearing just yet, and hopefully very shortly he would address the board regarding it. But I did
Okay.
follow up today.
Okay. With that, I move we approve the agenda.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Public comment. Is there anyone here who can comment publicly? Adele?
I'm here about the housing law. I have some real concerns about this law, and I'm going to ask a question. Maybe you can think about it and let me know after I'm done commenting about something else. But I'd like to know what a sleeping unit is. I've been sleeping unit. I've been doing this for a long time. I asked the board once before, the last board. I got 4 or 5 different answers. I'd like to know what your opinion of a sleeping unit is, because I have to fill this form out, and I never know what to say. I don't know if it's a bed, a bedroom, number of people. I just don't know what it is.
It should be defined in the code. I mean, I don't have the code right in front of me.
I'm not sure that it's defined.
It's a you can call the building department, they can answer it right off the bat.
So, the last building department, they were 2 different. She's the code enforcement officer or the building inspector was different. But anyway, that's one. I just wanted to know, because that's something in the registration form they get to fill out. The other problem I have is this temporary housing clause. You have temporary housing that says if something happens that is not the fault of the tenant, the landlord has to provide I have a lot of other issues with the law, and I'm hoping that you keep this open. And it's interesting that this is going on during the summer, when the law that affects 75% of the population in the village of New Paltz, most of them are not here. So I hope that you keep this public comment open. Okay?
Thank you, Doug. Yeah, Bob.
I just want to talk two issues real quick. Very,
Have to come a little closer.
Yeah.
very basic. You know, they say real estate is a bundle of rights. You have the right to exclude other people. You have the right to peacefully enjoy your property, enjoy it. You have all these different rights that are associated with ownership. And when you rent your property, you give up a very significant right. You give up the right of possession. And the landlord can no longer walk into that apartment at will. And he's giving possession to another person. And that's a very interesting thing. You know, this law holds the landlord responsible for the acts of the tenant. And that's beyond his control. Certainly there's influence, and most good landlords do try to influence their tenants to act properly and not bother their neighbors. But you're telling landlords that they have to police and control that individual, and that's a real person with his own rights, and he's got a right and expectation to privacy and quiet enjoyment of what he's paying for. So I think that's really a hard thing to get to work into this law. And I also want to say, New York State law has a real property law. I think it's Section 442 has what they call a warrant of habitability. It's one paragraph and it's very short. And what it says is that a landlord has to, by law, provide all the basic necessities, all the utilities. I think in light of that simplistic law, this is awfully superfluous. And something else, there's one other issue. Sidell said the cost of providing alternate housing. You know, I think last time I was here, I mentioned to you that this law sort of circumvents the judicial process. So we're going to have the building inspector determine that properties are not habitable. And what they're going to do is they're going to be evicting, forcing an eviction of that property. Now what happens is the landlord has to financially provide for that and has to pay for alternate housing. Now what happens if the landlord says, I'm going to start an Article 78 proceeding, take this to Supreme Court? He goes to Supreme Court and that judge says, wow, the village of New Paltz really overstepped their bounds, and this really was, they should have had a trial, they should have had some impartial referee, like a town justice or someone, determine who caused this problem and affix the responsibility and liability upon that person. And in this case, it was the landlord. So now you've got a landlord who's laid out thousands and thousands of dollars, and it's going to come back to you. It's going to come back to the taxpayer. They're going to say, hey, you guys didn't think this through. You came in, you were very cavalier, and you evicted people from a house. You put them up in a hotel, and it cost thousands of dollars, and it wasn't the landlord's responsibility. So I hope you'll look at that and perhaps study it. I think it's a very significant problem.
Thank you, Bob. Anyone else? Yes?
My name is Donna Wheaton. I live on Plains Road, and I'm here to discuss some things about the well testing that's going on at Plains Road. Got off to a very rocky start where we were uninformed, the residents on Plains Road were uninformed about anything happening, and when one of the residents' wells ran dry, then there was a public meeting after that, and then the communication has improved. So that's something that's very positive. Mr. Paltz and the Chase companies, that's a definite improvement. However, there are continued concerns. There are adverse effects that are being felt on various people's wells, different parts of the road, even though the testing stopped a week ago. I'm not a scientist. I don't know how to predict when these changes are supposed to stop, but common sense tells me this isn't the way it's supposed to be. The last thing that I would like to say is that now I am not a formal representative of the residents. However, I feel pretty safe in saying that our desire, while we might have slightly different hopes for the outcome of this process, I think we're all concerned about having the procedure be done fairly and the solution be found that's environmentally sound and safe. There's a phrase that's been bandied about for many years now, which is think globally and act locally, and this is a perfect example, a perfect example of what we can do in New Paltz to be leaders in that regard, to be responsible not only to solve the problems that face us right now this minute, but for the future going forward. And the last thing I'd like to ask is, how can we get to be on the agenda for the next meeting?
It would depend on what it is that you'd like.
I'm sorry?
It would depend on what it is that you'd like. What is it that you want to be on the agenda for?
To explore the issues related to the water project.
Well, we're going to have a presentation tonight on that.
That's going to be a presentation, but we'd like to be on the agenda to make a presentation as well.
Well,
I think so. Not
oh,
at the moment.
what's that?
Not at the
So-
moment.
The clerk can communicate with them. What does it take to get on the agenda? I guess just write an email to the village clerk.
Write an email.
Email to the clerk at villageofnewpaltz.org and just explain what it is you're looking for, and we'll put it in the next folder.
And what is the deadline for getting?
It's the Friday before the meeting.
Thursday.
I'm sorry, Thursday before the meeting.
And the next meeting is?
2 weeks from tonight. Is it?
August 7th.
Oh,
August
sorry.
7th is the 7th? Yes, that would be the deadline for getting your request in. The deadline for getting your request in is August 7th.
Okay.
The meeting is August 13th.
And it's noon, Donna. Noon on the
On
7th.
the 7th.
I would like to suggest that we have move the water up.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, we'll do that.
Okay.
All right, any other public comment? Yes?
Kim Kimball, 100 Plains Road. I would just request that the village board move forward so that we can get more information with the secret process, so we can get more information and ask more better questions. I would like to make sure that we look at this not just as water for now, but water for the future. And I wanted to make sure that this aquifer on the Plains Road really will provide for the future enough water and make sure that other alternatives have been sincerely looked at. We have reason to believe, and there have been comments made by other government officials, that this is the preferred source, this is where we're going, and we would just really like to request that other sources be reported on and have really seriously considered. There was also concern about a potential PR problem of getting people to drink the Wallkill water, and I would like to say that while that is an issue, it shouldn't preclude us from looking at the Wallkill as a source, and I think that there are certainly enough problems that this source has been causing to potentially cause the entire village in the future. So I just want to make sure that everything is fully considered, and that you begin seeker as soon as possible.
Thank you. We will be, and it is being fully considered, including the Wallkill. No decision has been made as to which source we would be using. We're still exploring. Any other public comment? Yes, Don?
Piggyback on that point, when we get the presentation tonight, I'd like to just ask that we hear information on any, beyond testing the Wallkill water for a year, which I know is important and required. I'd like any information on actual engineering work that's been investigated in terms of if we do find that water to be usable. It would be unfortunate if we began looking at the engineering of what to do next at that point. So I'm confident that there's been exploration of what we would do to actually transport and treat the well-kill water if we do have a positive result, because it's a very short time frame. So I'm just hoping that will be in the presentation. I look forward to it. Last thing I want to say, I've said at 2 public meetings that all the meetings I've attended on this thing have shown that when you look at the wall-kill water versus well water, it's not an engineering issue. We can do either one from an engineering standpoint. Financially, they cost about the same given current estimates. And the statement's been made a couple times that there are political considerations in terms of which decision will be made. And I would like at some point someone from the village board or the village board as a whole to address directly what those politics are and what might be driving decisions toward well water or toward well-kill water. If it's a political
we haven't even started the conversation. I mean, look, the DEC, the aqueduct shutdown seems like a crisis. Like it's bearing down on us very quickly, that things are happening very fast, and they are for a project of this size. But nothing is going to happen until we have a source of water, and nothing is going to happen. The water is not going to get shut off in New Paltz. We're not going to go into this blind or rush headlong into anything. It's going to be a considered discussion of all of the options, some of which have been discussed recently, like Plains Road or testing wells out by the Paltz property. Some of them are older conversations that date back a decade about things like connecting the Highland and New Paltz water system, or connecting the New Paltz system to a different aqueduct at Ireland Corners and Gardner. There's lots and lots of options that have been discussed over the years. So we're simply just not as far along in the conversation as I think you all are afraid we are. We're still looking at what the options are, and we haven't even begun to discuss the pros and cons of any of them. Other than from an engineering standpoint, or this would cost twice as much as this, or we'd have to pump the water uphill, or the technical details have been discussed, but there's been no policy discussion made. And if there's comments about the politics of using the Wallkill, that's the first I've heard of it. Other than just the obvious, it's a dirty river and people want to drink out of it.
When you're in the room in these meetings, there just seems to be a strong preference and expectation for one course over another. Maybe it's a misperception by myself and other people, but that's just a perception. And perceptions are subjective.
I think Tom's been going to this latest round of meetings, so he could speak to it. But in my experience in these meetings, that's not the case.
We're going to have a presentation.
Yeah.
I'm not at this moment willing to engage an audience in impromptu discussion when we have professionals about to make a presentation.
Well,
doesn't make any sense to me during public comment for me to be commenting when the public can comment.
Well, originally I was just asking for information to be in that presentation, so I agree.
You and I have had several discussions. I'm happy to have more.
Okay.
Any other public comment? All right, hearing none. Just so I can get a sense, how many of you are here for the presentation on the water? And how many of you are here for something else on the agenda? So I see Colin, the ENCC, and Rachel. Okay. Just so I know what to rearrange and bring up first so we can get the most people home.
Do you want to do Colin and Rachel first very quickly, and then...
Well, we've got about a dozen people waiting for the presentation.
Yeah,
we get them home
okay,
first.
let's do water first.
So, Dave, it's all you.
Colin, are you fine with that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Dave Clauser. I'm involved in the backup water supply investigation. We've been here and have given updates from time to time on this project. We've recently been doing some more groundwater exploration and thought it was a good time to update you on what we do have. We're still, thanks to the cooperation of especially the Plains Road residents, we've had a lot of monitoring wells that we've been able to include in the investigation, and we have a lot of data to compile right now, which Russell Urban-Mead is the hydrogeologist, as you know, and he's been working. We're still monitoring wells for drawdown. What I want to do is just give you a summary of the 5 components that we've been looking at in this investigation. As Jason had said, this has been going on for some time. In the fall of 2016 and again in 2017, there's going to be a 10-week shutdown in each year. We're looking at, we've gone through the production records of the village to try to find out what the average demand was. The average demand varies at the time of the year. One of the shutdown periods is supposed to be from October through December of 2016. And I'm not quite sure why, but we have high water usage then compared to other parts of the year. Now you think of the college being out for part of that time, but still we're up there on the high part of the year. The 5 components I have here is the existing village reservoir system, which is an existing village asset. I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about the Wallkill River surface water intake, the connection to the town of Lloyd, their existing water supply, the groundwater supply sources, which Russell will go over briefly what we've done so far and then where we're at right now on that. And then a final component is water use reduction. And that's kind of water use alternatives that I think is important in this process. With the village reservoir system, it's been a village asset for about 120 years. There's been a lot of different components that's been added on to that. Some of them work, some of them didn't work so well. It really is an important asset of the village. I looked at that. I looked at the watershed. I looked at the production records. I looked at how much they've been pumping out of the reservoirs compared to what they have been taking out of the aqueduct, trying to predict what we can assume will be the flow through that period of shutdown. I made some assumptions in that projection that 90% of the storage is usable. I used a conservative projection of the runoff yield. I based it on not the driest year, but a very dry year. We used a 11-year of statistics through 2002 through 2013. What I came up with is a conservative estimate of 175 gallons per minute can be expected out of the reservoirs. What I think is really necessary is that we really maximize that reservoir use. The village has a great water department. They have always had the aqueduct to depend on at any time. They've tried to use the reservoirs as much as they could to reduce the cost of the water from the city. For the shutdown period especially, and I hope that this will become a practice throughout the period, I want to try to harvest water out of the reservoirs. I want to really watch the weather forecast, draw down the reservoirs, be prepared for them to fill up with the watershed contribution. I want to add flashboards. The dams were built to be able to include more storage. It's a very simple matter to put flashboards in. You actually get about another 2 million gallons of storage just by doing flashboards in the 2 reservoirs. There's a transfer pump from the lower reservoir to the treatment plant. It's the only one. I want to put a backup pump in to make sure there's some redundancy there. There's some piping that would really make the use of the reservoir as much easier as far as providing storage from the lower to the upper by putting a short section of pipe in with a valve. And I would like to suggest that there be some gauging on the reservoirs between now and 2016 so we could really see very closely what the rainfall does as far as a contribution. And just looking at a 10% runoff rate, which is low according to standards, every inch of rainfall is worth 1 million gallons of water. So that's what I want to harvest. We really need to maximize the use of the river. We looked at the Wallkill River intake. We met with the Department of Health back in January to find out what they required. It's a Class B stream. Normally an intake is from an A stream. They said they would consider a Class B stream intake if we could provide at least 1 year's water quality data. We now have 7 months of that sampling and testing. This will probably also, it was inferred anyway, that there would be a pilot study that would be required to show the type of treatment that is being proposed would actually work in real time. The water quality shows, as Don said, that the source is very treatable. It's the new water process that the village is about to upgrade the treatment plant will be able to treat that, although you have to get the water up the mountain to be able to do that. There's a cost to that. The other method would be to build treatment closer to the village treatment, wastewater treatment plant, if there's area. You have to be very careful because there's floodplains and FEMA regulations in that area, so siting is important. The cost of the treatment would be high. The permitting would be very extensive. This includes most of the agencies that we're all familiar with. There's a water withdrawal permit application that's submitted jointly between agencies. It's the DEC, Corps of Engineers, and the Department of State, along with the Department of Health. That would require watershed mapping and acquisition maps, water analysis and treatment methods, meeting the Department of Health standards, an engineer's report including justification of selection by evaluating alternatives, and consideration of the needs of other communities, potential environmental impacts, and whether the demand can be reduced, total demand, hydrological information, and safe yield determination. That's just the information that needs to be prepared for the engineer's report. Current water conservation plan has to be in place in the village. Archaeological assessments would have to be provided. The Corps of Engineers is involved.
Don't say anything. It's a short site.
There's a permit application, excuse me, for the installation of a structure in navigable waters of the U.S. That goes through the Corps of Engineers. There's SHPO for the archaeological investigation. Basically everything along the Wallkill requires an archaeological investigation. And FEMA would have to approve any construction within a floodway. The village board would have to do a secret review prior to the application submittal with public outreach and education program provided. The project justification includes summary statements, answers to why the withdrawal project was selected from the evaluated alternatives, why the water withdrawal quantity cannot be reduced, whether the proposed water supply is adequate, whether the project is just and equitable to other municipalities and their inhabitants in regards to present and future needs. It's kind of quite a list of requirements. It's not a permit that would be quickly secured. The town of Lloyd connection, we met with the town twice, and I believe Tom also met the time before that. We talked about being able to get a local connection to their water supply. They do have capacity that's available. The water is Hudson River water, and it's also uses their existing reservoir. At the time that there is salt intrusion up in the Poughkeepsie area where the intake is, they use the reservoirs to be able to dilute the salt content to manageable levels. They have 3 million gallons per day available that they can process. They use less than 1 million gallons per day. The possible alternate pipeline route, there is one along the rail trail. That route is not favored by the town of Lloyd. The flow and pressure, we have reports from their engineer that show flow and pressure is suitable. The connection point is at 299 and 9W. The cost of connection from that point to the water storage tanks in the village is in excess of $8 million just by a rough estimate. You could expect a booster pump and chlorination at some point along 299. I'm expecting it to be pretty close to the town line. And the town is unwilling to consider a restriction on the use of the line in their town along 299. So if New Paltz were to build that line, it would be part of the water district that all the properties along 299 connect to.
Likely turning it into Ulster Avenue. Not putting words in your mouth, Dave. I'm just saying that for myself.
I was told that a lot of the property along 299 in that area, in that corridor, was wetlands, but I think if you drive from 9W to New Paltz, it's pretty evident where the wetlands aren't.
And where Walmart has wanted to be in the past.
I could turn it over to Russ now to talk about a little bit about groundwater resources, and then I'd like to talk to you a little bit about water use reduction after that.
Thank you.
Evening. You arrived? So as most of you know, we've been looking at groundwater option locations since, I think, November into December. Yellow dots on this map give you a sense as to the comprehensive nature of the location where we've advanced shallow or deep borings throughout the valley. Wallkill Valley location. We've also examined the pumping test records from this parcel here, just the other side of the thruway, and we've done a boring program on this piece of property yet a little further to the east. So we've looked quite comprehensively throughout the town for sources.
in service locations. To speak briefly about the well field here, in 1998, Malcolm Kearney wrote a report summarizing that 8 bedrock wells were drilled, of which 3 provided more than negligible yields. Wells 5 and 8 of those 8 total were individually tested at 118 and 93 gallons a minute, respectively. They were not tested together. They were acknowledged to be near enough to each other that if jointly pumped, those would not have been their expected joint yields. There was also a third well, well 4 on the location that was the kind of third in line, and it was not tested at the time. In 2001, a different firm went to the same site and retested well 5. They brought a pump that didn't have, in fact, the horsepower of the prior test, and so they retested well 5 and simply confirmed, again, single well availability of at least 90 gallons a minute. In 2008, the site was revisited. Some sites are very lucky. There were more extensive qualifying tests conducted, and by qualifying I mean they were extended to the full duration that the health department would expect if you were seeking to request their long-term use, both for duration and for quality testing. And because the health department likes to see duplicate capacity on the site, more than one combination of wells was tested. So at that point, in order to resolve the questions around well 5 being a narrow diameter well, but potentially having greater capacity, an adjacent well named 5A had been installed, larger diameter, 8 inches as opposed to 6. And using 5A and 8, previously referenced, the 2 were tested together for 72 hours and provided a combined yield of 133 gallons a minute. Drawdown numbers were in the range of 127 to almost 300 feet in the 2 wells, which is characteristic of rock wells. If you ask that much water from them, the drawdown is marked. Those 2 wells were then allowed to rest. Water levels on the site came back to a rest level, and then the original well 5 and the well 4 that had previously not been tested at all were together then pumped, and they provided a combined discharge of 153 gallons a minute. And the drawdown at the end of those tests were between 220 and 290 feet. Once again, demonstrating rock wells can be productive, but significant drawdown, and the beginning of that storyline was fairly characteristic of a rock investigation. You start with 8, and then you end up with 2 or 3 that produce water. So that is that site, and I know there have been questions about this part of town, and that is a well field that we continue to look at with optimism. Turning to the work along the Wallkill, we advanced the work here comprehensively, and for those of you who were here at the community meeting, please bear with my backing up just a moment. But we did some geophysical transects across the valley in 3 locations where we could get site permission, access permission, and those geophysical evaluations helped us understand that in addition to being broad and flat, there was also a topography of the buried rock under the sediments. And so what we were able to identify quite clearly on this trajectory is that there was a spot where the rock was particularly deep, about a third of the way up across 101 Plains Road. And that as you went from the bridge to the breaking slope rising to the west, that presumably the same trough was intercepted kind of just the other side of the major intersection on the far side of the bridge. And then the golf course was so good as to let us to do a traverse on that property, and the particularly deep zone was close to the location of the current Wallkill. The Wallkill today is somewhat oblivious to the topography that flows that is deep underneath it, because it occupies the floodplain above what all subsequent drilling has demonstrated to be fairly thick lake clays, post-glacially or lake clays, that in some cases underneath, and it was the purpose of some of the deep borings, had some sediments that were more sandy and even gravelly. And so the best of those sediments that were found anywhere. For one thing, on top of that clay everywhere, there's something like 15 to 20 feet at most of some saturated kind of outwash silty sands. We tested a well here, and because it's very shallow and the drawdown spreads pretty quickly, we didn't get more than 15, 20 gallons a minute on that one. So I think we have a lack of confidence that the deposit that's on top of the clay can support the kind of demand that we're looking for, although those kinds of deposits on top of clay are fully capable of supporting some homeowners who have caisson-style demos. Perfectly viable for that kind of use, but problematic for a larger demand use. So after filtering this all down, we ended up with a test well that was fairly close to the deep point, fairly close to this geophysical alignment at 101. And the challenge is, and was, and many people here know the complications, but the challenge is that this gravel was found adjacent to a heavily settled neighborhood. So, and so the challenge was to conduct a test that was respective of those needs. That test started on the 12th, Saturday the 12th, and ran until the following Wednesday with intensive collection of manual water level data. What we ended up doing to distribute the withdrawal from this location was to install a second well so that neither would be pumped at the full potential demand being sought to meet the need that Dave has described. We put in a second well, and those two wells were pumped. Once again, the health department required 72-hour test. At a combined rate of 400 gallons a minute. Well 1 was pumped at 275 gallons a minute. Well 2 was pumped at 125. We extended the test after 72 hours for another 24 hours at just the rate of the production well 1, 275, for an additional 24 hours to evaluate the response to a lesser rate, and in large measure to be able to continue examining what impacts were happening, radiating outward around the site without working the drawdown quite as intensively close in. Drawdown, as you would expect, was most profound in the two pumping wells. I described to you for these rock wells, when they were pumping at rates of up to 100 gallons a minute, they had drawdowns in the range of up to 300 feet. To produce 400 gallons a minute, these two wells, neither drawdown was over 100 feet. In fact, each was about 80 feet. So this speaks to why there is some advantage to looking to sand and gravel sources. because they are significantly more productive than a large collection of rock wells. Near the end of the 72-hour test, drawdown in the 2 production wells. What happens in a pumping test is there's always an immediate drawdown in the well as the well reacts to the withdrawal, and then there's stabilization. And so what we were seeing as we headed out to 72 hours was increasing stabilization, which was good to see. And we saw that in most of homeowner wells also. An aquifer test has 2 distinct and important parts. The first part is the drawdown period. The second part that's equally important and that is easy to overlook is the recovery period. We examine the recovery data just as carefully as we examine the drawdown data. So, although we stopped pumping last Wednesday, for those living in the neighborhood, you know we've continued to visit and measure water levels in the neighborhood because we're as interested in the recovery signature of the well field as we were in the drawdown period. And effectively, the 2 at the end of the day are analyzed together. So when people ask me right now what was the effect of the test, in a very real sense, the test isn't over yet because we're still looking at recovery. I can tell you that all water levels everywhere in the well field are within 10 feet or less of where they started. So we're back to water levels that are within the seasonal fluctuation of what most wells would do anyway. And of course, homeowners are also using their own wells. So when we visit manually, we'll get this, and then we'll get this, and then we'll get this, and then we'll get that. But when we see many like this and one like that, we know that's when the homeowner's using their own well, and that's fine. They should be using it, and that's why we collect a multiple of water levels. But that's what we're seeing at this stage. So data loggers, just to provide the board a briefing on the work that you all know that we did, conducted in the neighborhood. Data loggers in a few homes and real-time manual monitoring conducted in approximately 50 homes. Just a wonderful response and has allowed a collection of a tremendously deep database. The goal was to collect data supporting the test, but also to identify any wells where water level would be dropping near pumps. The project plan included preparations as necessary to place between 10 and 15 people on temporary water tanks. We were pleased that after 72 hours of pumping, only 3 needed to be placed on water tanks. In all cases, we notified them the day before that water levels were approaching where we knew their pumps to be and that it was just wiser to shift them over, and they were gracious enough to allow us to do that. There were 2 others that we had concerns about, but they allowed us, and a number of other homeowners did, to camera their wells. And when we cameraed their wells, we determined that their pumps were deeper than some of the more shallow pump settings, and so we knew they were going to be all right. So we didn't have to put as many people in tanks as we were prepared for, which is nice because our basic objective was to enter as few wells as possible. Some of you saw the water level meters that we used. They're basically little echo boxes. You place the meter over the top of the well, and it makes a sound like a tennis ball being hit. And then there's an echo, and the time of the echo tells you the depth of the water. So in most of the wells, we didn't even have to enter the well to get a water level, which was our preference, and I think it was everybody's preference. As requested in a community meeting held before the test, residents were offered sampling before and after pumping tests. Most residents have now received their pre-test sample data. And we will be making appointments tomorrow and the next day to make follow-up sample visits the week of the 28th. So we're doing that, and I think we're feeling like the week of the 28th is far enough into the period where there's been aquifer rebound that it's somewhat fair to call it a post-test sample. So what's next is, once again, because the pumping test in a sense is still happening, we're still seeing recovery follow the testing period, we're still in the observation period. Test observations will continue through the full groundwater recovery period. It's then upon us to provide careful analysis of the drawdown and rebound count curves. As part of that, there would be analysis of the recharge area and potential mitigation areas that might be needed based on the drawdown influences that absolutely were extending out into the residential neighborhood, and how those would be worked, and that would be part of the analysis and conclusions of the report. The water quality data from the 2 test wells are important to us in the health department. The water quality data collected on behalf of the residents will be considered because it makes sense to look at it in terms of water that is recharging or contributing to the recharge of the 2 wells, but primarily the purpose of those sample data is a benefit to the neighborhood and a way to think about or adjudicate the impacts of the test. So I think that takes me to the end of my comments about the scope of the groundwater study, both in its expanse and throughout the town, the Rockwell locations we've looked at, the other locations to the west that we've looked at, the kind of whole sweep of analyses and investigations that has happened, ultimately focusing on the one location that, based on 4 months of investigation or 5 months of investigation, identified the best and thickest gravel deposit found till now. So that's my report, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Is that by the quarry, by the old quarry, or no?
The sand and gravel operation?
Yeah. Yeah, that's okay. So that's been sort of extensively dug.
Just want to say that without the cooperation of the community, we never could have done this. There's over 130 holes here. There's a lot of drilling. We had snow removal activities to be able to get the drill rigs in, and it was a challenge. The last component I want to talk about briefly was the water use reduction as a water supply alternative. And there's 2 programs that I'd like to talk about on that. One is the leakage detection. I know the village has been involved in that. I don't know how up to date they are. I think they keep very up to date. I don't believe the town keeps as up to date. But we really need to stay on top of that. The leaks happen because of old pipes. Usually you can consider that a system will have like an 8% as a common number for unaccounted for water, and that includes hydrant flushing, any fire use. There's also the leaking pipes. I see from the usage that it's gone up in the last 3 years, and I just think we really need to be careful to make sure that the leakage detection is done. I know New York Rural Water provides that. The village has been taking advantage of that.
We do it quarterly.
Pardon me?
We do it quarterly.
Really?
We have the leak codes are reported through our software as we check for when we drive around to see how much people have used for the water, anything that is an out of the ordinary amount of usage triggers a code that we automatically investigate.
But do you use the leak detection service on the mains? That's
I don't know. I'm sure we do. I don't know how often we do that. But we do monitor the usage of each individual customer to make sure they're not using more than normal.
My question is, you said the usage has gone up in 3 years, the demand.
Right.
Do you have a breakdown between the village and the town water districts and that demand?
I don't have that, so.
I think we would need that.
Yep. I think the town also, I need to find out the last time they did leakage detection. I believe it's been a couple years ago, but it needs to be updated.
The village had offered at one point to help the town with the new water meter readers, and they never took advantage. So I think that should be something you might want to pursue too.
What I'm happy about is Chris Yeager is also working with the town now, so I think there's a little bit of coordination there. And we really trust Chris on his abilities. The second part is the water conservation program. Tom and I attended a seminar here a couple months back by the Water Research Foundation. It was a very good seminar. The goal of water conservation is to improve the efficiency of the customer's end use. Let's deliver the same services with less water, basically. And there's two types of water conservation. There's the short term, and that's usually attributed to a drought or an emergency that is a necessity to conserve water. The other is a long-term conservation program. And it's something that all communities should really take a look at. Besides it being the right thing to do, there's some really advantages to be had with that program. It's can be used as a substitute for investments in infrastructure. And you grow and you have to build more infrastructure. If you start a water conservation program, you may not have to at least build as much as quick. With less water use, you avoid the cost of treatment of the water. You also avoid the cost of treatment of wastewater, which is a real factor. Maybe an alternate to new supplies. You can serve enough.
I'm just gloss on that because since I attended this conservation workshop with Dave, and I actually attended another workshop that focused in part on conservation. It would be my intention to work with the Environmental Policy Committee to start a water conservation practice, both an educational one and, if necessary, to ask for legislation. We were very encouraged to learn that some very large water districts in the United States have saved in excess of 5% of their water use. And in a little place like New Paltz, even that could mean 30 gallons a minute. That would be a very significant amount of water for our village.
Question.
Yeah.
Jason, we have the revolving loan fund that we really haven't had too many users for. Is there any way that we could use the revolving loan fund to, say, go 50% with people if they were putting in a low-use toilet? Would that be a balance?
If it's in the requirements that we have? We have requirements that Ariana and Stuart work
No,
on
in other
for a
words,
year. I'm saying if it's not in that list, we can't loan the money for any other purposes than it's on that list.
Do you have the list?
Well, yeah, I mean, I can tell you some of the things off the top of my head, maybe not everything, but some of it is for like green improvements, sustainability.
And plumbing improvements?
I don't think it went as specific as plumbing.
Okay.
But it definitely was, like if you're renovating your building and you're greening it, that is part of it, but it's not for residential properties.
Yeah, it's a business loan.
Let's see if we can't get a hold of somebody in Washington, since those HUD grants are no longer given, and ask.
We cycled through the HUD money already, so that's part of why we were able to change the requirements to begin with.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we chose not to add anything to do with something residential because we wanted it to be based economic based, have it be something that drives the economy and creates jobs like the original mission.
But my question is, can we go back and rethink this and go halvesies, because you can sort of, does economic development get stimulated by people coming into a community or vice versa, and maybe because I know that those funds were used or lent to people who wanted to do house renovations and all that kind of stuff. If we could tweak it a bit and come up with a conservation program where somebody would be willing to go halvesies with the village for a very economical new toilet system that uses 1 gallon instead of 15 gallons. If we could start thinking about that.
Sally?
What do you think?
I mean, I'm totally open to it. We'd have to bring it to the committee.
Yeah. Would you?
I would not mind doing that, no.
Well, I don't think it's an appropriate use for that fund.
I don't either. Yeah, it doesn't agree with the original scope, even though the scope may have been changed. But one area I think that we could look at is the new programs that RUPCO is working with.
Yep, you could go that way.
I think that would make total sense because, you know, even though many of those projects are looking more at energy efficiency, solar, et cetera, but this is another area of efficiency and certainly less water usage, you know, correlates with less energy usage.
But also less water usage. We have 2 laundromats. That's economic development. You could get into.
That's a perfect area.
Perfect place.
Well,
and I think if we wanted to tweak it a bit.
We're going to have a report by September
We wouldn't have to change the
30th.
scope at all for a laundromat or any other business to take advantage of the revolving loan fund to do some kind of greening. We wouldn't have to change the scope. They could do that right now.
Right, but
Yeah.
let's see if we can't tweak it in some other
And
ways.
regardless, we're not finished with this project
Yes.
yet.
No.
We're going to have
presentation.
our final. We're not going to have our final final report until 30th of September, I think.
Right, but
So we've got. So basically, let's not take up any more time at this meeting figuring out one facet to this larger issue, and maybe get back to.
no, but my only
presentation.
point, Jason, was that sometimes going parallel, if you have a goal and you know you have to be at a certain place in time, and you know that one of the ways to get there is conservation, it is a very good
Right.
idea to begin
But
the parallel process.
We don't know if this is a good use of the money. We don't know how much water would be
That's
saved.
what we need to find out.
And we don't know any of these other things. So, Dave, would you mind?
Sure. Next steps in the phase 2 is to compile the data that's collected, consider the potential impacts and any mitigation that may be required, provide conceptual engineering evaluations of the various alternatives, investigate preliminary development requirements, timing, and delivery costs, then make recommendations to the village board in the final report. And as Jason said, that report will be in your hands by September 30th. Phase 3 services would include an environmental review of the project components, developing the detailed project plans, construction process. That's all we have as far as an update. We'll be staying in touch. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, Dave.
Any questions for Dave or Russell from the board? No?
Would it be okay if somebody had a dying question out there that they could ask?
Please, in the back.
I just have a question. Where does the seeker process fit into this? I'm wondering if that can be answered.
Seeker process fits in when you have, the board will take our recommendations and make a decision on what they need to do, which components to use to make up this backup water supply.
So it sounds like it's after your recommendations prior to a decision?
There needs to be a project before seeker can start, but that will start immediately at the time that the board makes that decision.
Can you clarify for me why this isn't the project? It seems to me on some level like it's already begun. And maybe I'm misunderstanding that.
Seeker has a part that says that engineering investigations, including subsurface, are classified as type 2 actions. And the state considers that there is no significant impact associated with type 2 applications.
question. Tom Actu on Kings Road. When you let off, Mr. Paltz, you said that this is the backup water supply. It seems to me that everything we'll be hearing is that this is the need for backup water supply is at hand, but it seems as if it's going to be a permanent solution to the water for the town and village.
If the board determines...
See, this has got nothing to do with the professional analysis. This is a political decision.
Okay.
It is.
I just wanted to make
This is not what these folks are in it for.
It is a question.
Of course it's a question. We've dealt with it 6 or 8 times already.
But
It's not for these guys to deal with.
So it's just insulting that they keep calling a backup solution. Next question is, was anybody notified on Cedar Ridge?
Yes. There were 2 data loggers that were put in Cedar Ridge just to measure drawdown and measure read. Yes?
Your phase 1 report identified 2 additional groundwater sources, and the recommendation of that phase 1 report was that they were worthy of further exploration. And one of them was the property on Springtown Road, and the other was Fairgrounds. What has become of that? It was just done in May, which was right around the same time of the first unannounced test that was done on Plains Road. Has anything subsequently come of those 2?
Part of the boat launch information was already provided in that phase 1 report done by the other consultants. Interestingly enough, the best form of sediments on the property were close to Springtown Road. We had properties that we did similar borings all along there. As far as the fairgrounds, we show you on the map, but we went on both sides of the fairgrounds extensively trying to find if there was similar sediment there. We did talk to the county about continuing investigation on that property, and they weren't interested.
They weren't interested?
Right.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, potentially neither were the residents of Plains Road, but I'm sorry, maybe I didn't understand the Springtown Road one. That was not found to be productive?
There were, Russell, you can help me on this, there were about 4 or 5 borings.
I mean, it was in that same area that we did our test well, and that well was not productive. It was also loaded with dissolved iron. It would have been very, very difficult to treat. So we basically ran that one to ground. And in the fairgrounds area, there were access issues on the fairgrounds parcel, but we drilled immediately north and south of that property, explored both of those extensively, and concluded by working around the fairgrounds property that what was immediately adjacent, both upstream and downstream, was not productive. Really, I mean, we tried to lock those doors down, and believe me, it wasn't my first choice to drill the Plains Road. It was you know, we came to that after ruling out the others.
You want to take a break?
Forgive me for...
I don't know.
I just want
I'm not
to
going to say
put
anything.
my own mind. The
Told
end
not
of
to
this-
say anything.
The September 30th deadline means that you're going to give a report to them on all of your findings for all of the various drillings and locations. And at that point, then they decide where they want to go. And then they say, these are the 1 or 2 places or 3 places, whatever, we're going to use. And that's when the engineering part starts with part 3. Am I correct in that that's how it works?
We do some very basic engineering just to come up with cost estimates on the components, just to help the board understand what the cost expectations are.
But September 30th, they should have all the information to begin really seriously looking at what options they want to consider. Does the fact that the Wallkill won't have met its year-long testing, will that create a problem?
We can continue that testing. We do have some information on what it would take to use the Wallkill as an intake. Testing is something that's that first step right after the environment. Again, it's a B stream, and that's not common. There's an intake being in a B stream in New York State.
And my final question is, you call this, or it's referred to as the pre-test that you just did for us, but we're continuing to have people that say that they've had, after your first test, which there was no pre-test, You know, they've had changes in water, changes in smell, they've had turbidity, they've had many things happening between the one that didn't last the full 72 hours, the 54-hour test, and what you call the 72-hour test. So with you not really being sure what's going on underneath, because people who had bedrock wells you didn't think it was going to be affected, and they did go down quite a bit. Other people you didn't think were going to be affected, and they lost their water. So I think that since you don't have a crystal ball and you can't see really what's underneath there, and what the communication is between the layers and the levels, actually you can have a guess, but you don't really know. Is it possible that our wells changed before your pre-test, that your pre-test really wasn't a pre-test because our wells had already undergone some kind of effect from your 54-hour?
Kim, that is a speculative question. It isn't helpful to this, and I think in fairness to New York and to Dave and to Jason, they have very much reached out to people, and people who are having difficulties are supposed to be in touch with them. And to speculate that Susie is having problems with her well, she is a responsible person. If she's having problems, she needs to contact, and not to sit here and speculate, gee whiz, I might have a problem, or maybe I don't have a problem. You either are observing things or you're not observing
It's not
things.
speculation. There are things that happen. There are actual things that happen, and they received emails about them after the 54-hour test, the very first one.
And
so
they're dealing with that.
Okay, but our wells at that point had already received recharges from places that they really can't tell us where it came from. Our wells received that. So then they did the pre-test. But are we really sure that and I'm not attacking them. These men have answered so many of my emails. I mean, they have spent hours and hours and hours in dealing with us. I'm not faulting that in any way, shape, or form. What I'm saying is, though, do we really know that our pre-test was a pre-test? Because we did see changes after the 54-hour test to our water. So that was just my point. I just sort of wanted it on record that we had had changes before the pre-test.
Thank you. Yes.
Based on what you've done so far and your expertise, I know that you haven't written the report yet, but can you kind of give us an idea as to which area out of the several that you've talked about looks the most promising? It sounds like it's along Plains Road.
I could say that there's one that's the most promising, and that's the existing reservoirs. Beyond that, I really need to get Russell's data compiled, and he's still collecting it. I hesitate to say too much here. There's always people that have great memories, and sometimes I am not accurate. I'm not with the latest that Russell has picked up, so I'd rather not say at this point, but we certainly will evaluate all the alternatives and make recommendations.
Any last comments? All right. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you so much.
Russell.
Thank you.
And we'll take a 5-minute recess while the room clears. Yeah. Don and Johnny, we're going to interview Rachel and Colin quick before we get yours, because it'll be done fast. Excuse me, Tom. No, I'm yeah. Rachel Gagka to be a commissioner. All in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations, both of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Don, you want to go right into your...
Sounds great, sounds good. And Rachel, if you want. You're welcome. One of the items that we want to talk about is a plastic bag ban, and John has been the proponent and moving force behind that, so I want to give him the opportunity to answer questions and speak. Here are my notes.
Thank you, John.
So hopefully people received the email that had the language of the legislation that I would suggest using. It's identical to what I showed you last time. Based on what I've seen and my research and looking into it, I think it's something that's actionable. I think it's something that's doable, and I would recommend moving forward. There are several variations on the law, one being what agency would be designated to regulate or enforce the ban. I can show you what that looks like, but that's up to you whether or not you want to include that. I would suggest using this language or something very close to it, only for the fact that it originated in Westport, I believe in 2008, and it's since been adopted by the 5 municipalities in New York that have gone through with this ban, and they've not had any challenge to it. So it has the advantage of that. I guess at this point, I'll take any questions.
Have you had a meeting with merchants to talk about this idea?
I have not. I did make some phone calls that were unreturned, so I have not had opportunity to do that at this time.
Would that be a good idea?
There's a degree of outreach that can be done. I know in West Hollywood, where they enacted something similar, they got in touch with the Chamber of Commerce and sort of tried to work together with them. It's not exactly clear to me at what point that occurred. Before doing something like this, of course, there should be a period of public comment, at which point, those voices could even be invited to speak. So I'm not exactly sure at what point that conversation needs to happen.
If I may just make a suggestion on that, because I have spoken with some merchants in exploring this idea, but I think maybe the best way of doing it that's the least time-consuming and the most putting it out there, for right now at least, is to just write a letter to the editor. Have it be in the New Paltz Times, somewhere, to just kind of like putting it out there, letting people know that this is coming down the line. And I mean, a lot of people read the paper, not everybody reads the paper, but we'll obviously have a public comment period, but it could give people a little lead time.
Sure.
And their contact has been made with the Chamber of Commerce, who was enthusiastic about the idea. I think what would probably, with regard to the business community, sometimes communities need to be nudged and pushed to do the right thing, and I think that would be the case here. I don't think you're going to find the business community advocating for this. I mean, I would not expect that they would. Maybe they will embrace it, but I think the idea would be to pass the law to change the reality and give it enough lead time. Perhaps take action now, but nothing takes effect till after the holiday season. So if someone's ordered 10,000 bags and they're plastic, that they know they shouldn't make that next order. So I think that's the way to consider the business community.
Maybe like January 1st.
I don't disagree, and you touched on the one thing that I don't know how long in advance people have to make orders, but I know that Ariana and I have had meetings where we've just announced there's going to be a meeting on such and such a night to discuss parking or meters or whatever, and at least the meeting's been called where people can come and just ask questions, so that you get a better sense of where you want to take this.
Well, I suggest we do that either at our next meeting or your next meeting, a month from now.
I think
that sounds great.
you could put in one of those little public announcements into the paper. You know how the front of the paper has a lot of single paragraphs?
Press releases, right?
Yeah, and invite people to your next meeting. So I think your next meeting would be the most appropriate to have that discussion.
And have asked Katie to put it on the website that we're, a meeting's going to be held on such and such to discuss the proposal to ban plastic bags in the village of New Paltz.
I mean, if you're officially doing it at your next meeting, we could tell Mike is sitting right here.
Katie's right over there.
He'll put it on the front page.
You have a problem with that, Rachel? Okay, 3 of our 4 commissioners are good with that, so I think we'll do with that.
Is it August 26th, your next meeting? That's the 4th.
I am so dyslexic with dates. I'm not going to answer the question.
It's the 4th Tuesday.
Yes, thank you. Okay.
And that way you can tweak it, if you think.
Absolutely, and the language in the law does allow room for making exceptions for certain types of bags. So if there is a need within the community for something that needs to be exempted, certainly the design of that legislation allows for that.
I spoke as requested with Kathy Cartagena from Family of New Paltz, and she has already instructed her clients to bring their own bags or cardboard boxes. That we're not going to deal in plastic bags anymore. No problem at all.
That's excellent.
I think in this community, if we had a lead time of 6 or 8 months, I think the business community, we could find a way for the business community to find some advantage in helping to create reusable bags with their business information on it. If we had a bag that New Paltz is green and these businesses believe in that, I think we can make this happen. But the first step is to pass the law, and so that's what we're trying to move the board toward.
So I would like to make a motion to allow the attorney to take the law, the sample legislation that you have presented us, and make it applicable to the village, so we have something to actually look at and work with.
Well, John,
you want them to have the meeting first, and then.
I think this could be done simultaneously.
Well, the language is that. I'm sorry, you guys talk.
I mean, if we want to move forward with this, I don't see any reason not to do it simultaneously.
I mean, and tweak it after the meeting if it needs to be tweaked.
Well, we have to make it apply to the village anyway, even if it's just like minor edits, like the sections.
Right, but I mean, we have to allow. I mean, I have no problem with that as long as we're open to your tweaking it if you think it needs to be tweaked.
Yeah. Well, what would you like? I mean, is that a good?
I don't see the problem with showing it to the attorney and having him, polish it up so that it can be applied, and then simultaneously we could have our meeting.
Okay.
And then, in addition to our meeting, I think it would be wise to have a larger public hearing before.
Oh, well, there has to be.
We legally have to put anything.
That's part of it. But mine was more an informational meeting suggestion, but I'll second the motion to refer.
Okay.
And I think the 6 communities, that's the one in Connecticut which started this, and the 5 in New York, have all used the exact same language in their laws, with the exception of enforcement. So we hope we can get to a place where we won't need to tweak anything but that. But we will have that meeting and invite the comment.
And don't forget, enforcement always requires time and money, so that would be a consideration too, because I mean, our budget's in place. And so
I think we would depend on moral suasion, which I learned. Okay, so municipal solid waste pickup. Jason has done a lot of communication. When I spoke with the gentleman from Watervliet, Chris, the folks from Watervliet especially, call us. We'll answer any question you have. They really were a cheerleader. He was a cheerleader for this whole effort. My questions were pretty much what are the downsides, what are the surprises, what are the landmines, what are the problems we should expect, and in their case, they really haven't had any. They've been really, there it is, okay. They've been really impressed by, there have been no surprises, it's gone so well. Their plan, and I assume the plan that we're talking about is based on what's being done in 8 towns already in New York State. He has confirmed the cost savings. They've had no issue. He just said it was great, and do it. And anything I can answer, I'll answer. But there were no real landmines or downsides they've experienced in Watervliet. So I think the RFP that's out there to contract with an individual contractor is a good step to get there. And if at the end of that contract we can be prepared as a community to move to municipal solid waste, I think that's a realistic time frame and something that we really heartily recommend. There was discussion of the Millbrook Preserve report, and some trustees may have questions. There was a suggestion of bringing people in to answer questions.
Well, that was one of the questions I asked Rachel, because Millbrook Preserve is and has been for a very long time a topic of interest to her.
Yes.
And this board and previous boards have never been presented the Millbrook Preserve report, although some people have asked for it. And my question when it was before us is that I think the original author of that report needs to be a part of any changes made in that report, just as a matter of courtesy.
So the EPC, my organization that we're a part of, really has no opportunity to recommend to the village board because you have not received that report as of yet?
No. We got...
Okay, well, we can just end it there. You guys talk among yourselves.
No.
As far as our role.
We don't have to rehash it all, Sally.
We got a report, the Millbrook Preserve report, which had edits to it. It has never been presented by the authors to this board, the report itself.
All right, well,
because Rachel is so knowledgeable about this topic, at least as far as I know, I would love for her to review it with whoever is involved with this and then present it.
Well, we can request that of them, but this is a project that's not a village board project. I mean, it's a Clean Water Open Space Committee project. They tell me that they're going to have the report to us by the end of July, early August, for our consideration and adoption.
And for the purposes of this presentation, we recommend at the earliest possible opportunity that the village accept whatever report you receive, assuming it's acceptable to you. Okay, let's move on.
No, wait, I'm not moving on.
Okay, well, I am
okay,
from my
there
standpoint.
was a Millbrook Preserve report which was done several years ago.
The first draft. They're working on the final draft now.
That is the report I think should be presented with recommended updates by the author of that report, with whoever he wants help from, presumably your commission, and then.
They're doing
I don't want.
They're doing what you want, Sally.
I am explaining what I want.
No, they're doing what you want. They're doing exactly what you're describing.
Jason just said that they would have it. They said they would have it to us late July, early August.
The original report. And
the final, the updated version.
You're missing my point. I don't want an updated version when I've never even seen the original version and heard that discussed. And I would like that report presented.
That's not how these things work, and you can't just make demands like that of people. There's a process in place to do this. It broke because the grant is about to run out. They're trying to make sure the grant money doesn't run out. So they've got a deadline now. You're going to have a presentation of the Millbrook Preserve by the people who wrote it and by the people who've been doing this work. You're just not having it right this second. You're going to have to wait. You have to wait until they're done.
You're missing my point. Is my understanding Mr. Zerler wrote the original Millbrook Preserve report along with who?
No, it was a consultant who did it.
Yeah, a paid consultant. He said he was going to edit it, but then that was in 2010, and both he and KT Tobin Slusser went over it, and also other people in the CWAS committee looked at it too and wrote their comments. And then Michael was supposed to give those comments to the consultants, and that's where it broke down. That's what didn't, I don't know, that's where I don't know exactly what happened right after that. But there was no actual revision that was produced on the basis of Michael, KT, and...
So now they're going to produce a revision?
Yes.
That, I believe, it is going back to the consultants, or are they just, is it going back to Nan, and is that...
No, there's no more money. The CWASP committee is doing it.
Okay, so...
Then it's going to go back to, go back to the funders for their approval. And then it comes to the town and village boards for our approval, and then we can use it to get grant money. That's about it.
I hope you'll be a part of it.
Well, thank you very much. I hope we get everything again like this. Because, I mean...
And we don't need to talk about the Noble Preserve. It's not on our agenda. We have nothing in front of us.
Do we just, I guess I would amend and make a global statement that it would be good to have that process finalized. Okay. There's an item on this evening's agenda, and with regard to the SECRA law review change, and as we've analyzed the background information, there seems to be a perception of this issue as a choice between a wetlands law and the revision being proposed. And I don't see it as a choice at all. I see them as completely harmonious and completely, I see one as being a short-term solution, which would be the revision that's on the agenda for this evening. There is no wetlands law, and it would take some period of time to write one. In the case of the town, it took a long time to write it. It's a long, complicated thing, and I would imagine, even though the area in the village is smaller, there would be a period of time, whether it be a week or a year or 3 years. There's a period of time before a wetlands law could be in place, and during that period of time, we have no protection from certain things. And I know there are currently projects ongoing in the village that people are not happy about and wish there had been some more control over. We don't know what the future's going to bring, but if there's something in place for the short term, and I think a way to bring harmony to these two strategies would be to write the modification to the SECRA in a way that the modification expires with the passage of a wetlands law. That way you have the short-term protection, and when you no longer need the short-term emergency protection, you advance and make a nice transition to a wetlands law. But if you just go with the wetlands law, you've got nothing in the interim. And so we strongly recommend that the board consider and adopt the change as presented.
Did you evaluate the planning board's references to us? They recommended against it.
Yeah.
Okay, and would you care to talk about why they're recommending against it and you're recommending for it?
I wouldn't want to make their argument for them or analyze it. I would simply say that if their recommendation was followed, as I just said, that brings no short-term protection. It doesn't solve the problem in the short term. And I'm all in favor of the wetlands law, which is one of their recommendations. But we've got to have something in the meantime. And I think all the arguments or concerns with regard to a change to the secret process are reasons that those same people should write that wetlands law. That's if they're concerned about that law should be addressed. And that's we got to get there.
That wasn't my understanding of what the planning board said. They said that they were, and I think the county concurred, that the planning board right now has the ability to require evaluation of certain areas for a type 1.
I understand, but I think.
So why would I take that power away from the planning board if they are in a position to say, okay, Don, you've got this project before us, but I think you need to do a type 1?
Because they are not guided by a wetlands law. Because they do not have the legal, they do not have the tools currently to mitigate all circumstances. Or, you know, that's the answer. They don't have that tool. Yes, they do have the ability, but but I think in the absence of a wetlands law, there are things that can fall through the cracks, and I don't see an argument, I don't see a downside for being too safe. I don't see a downside in this village where there's not very many acres left.
That's right.
And if there's an acre that hasn't been built on, there's probably some reason. You know, it may be that engineering has overcome that reason, but I think there's such precious little left that I think we need to err on the side of caution, or at least as the Environmental Policy Commission, from the perspective of that charge and that organization, we feel it's good, sound environmental policy to err on the side of caution and to be a little too strong. And that's, you know, given the two choices,
even if it means litigation.
I'd leave that. I would, you know.
I mean, the town is at the final stage of litigation on their wetland law.
Mm-hmm.
Once this court ruling occurs, that's it.
Well,
it's
until the next appeal. Yeah, okay.
It's at the highest level.
Mm-hmm. I understand.
So, would it not behoove us to await that decision?
I think every day that there is no short-term protection, there is no short-term protection. And I think the wheels of justice turn slowly. And yeah, a decision is expected. I'm not familiar. Maybe that decision is coming next week. So yeah. But I from the standpoint of an environmental policy commission, I think it is responsible in keeping with our charge to advise this board to have the maximum amount of protection for our village when it comes to these issues, and that's where we come from. The planning board may have its own perspective, and I respect that, and we did consider and discuss a lot their concerns and the fact that we would not be consistent with those concerns. But this is our recommendation.
Did you have an opportunity to go back and look at the Hudsonian report?
I did not. We have, with regard to signage at the Wallkill, the attorney approved our language and asked that we put on the bottom citizen testing performed by Riverkeeper. Riverkeeper was not comfortable with that because there's no data on the sign doesn't have enough weight or substance in terms of presenting data. So what we are proposing as a middle ground is either posting both signs at the boat launch, both the small one and the one we're going to post at Village Hall, or on the bottom of the sign post a URL link to this document. So people with their smartphone who might want to know, well, what's this sign all about, can get to this.
I think that your second idea is a good one.
And I think since Riverkeeper's attorneys have been through this, I'm hopeful and expecting that our attorney will have no problem with us using it. But I think that's what we want to do as far as signage at the Wallkill. The attorney and I just spoke last Friday on the first variation. So by your next meeting, we should have a final versions to get to you.
I asked you a question in an email, and I wasn't being smart.
Yeah.
Should we think about no fishing signs?
I think Riverkeeper would not be comfortable with that because they are just putting out data. They're not making any recommendations. So we would be going beyond what Riverkeeper's doing. I think to say, eat at your own risk, the water may be not suitable for human use is pretty strong. Fish at your own risk, we could do that. We could do that. We haven't.
I mean, I don't know whether we should.
Yeah, and it hasn't been a topic at our meeting, so it will be at the next meeting. We have two vendors presenting to us on our August meeting. I think it's the 24th, not the 14th. And we are planning outreach on home energy audits and a strategy to promote those. To note to myself there for the next agenda, should we try to meet or discuss or have some outreach with the DPW in terms of greening their operations and practices? It's just a note to ourselves whether we might want to talk about doing that.
Great. Well, thank you, Don.
Okay. Let's let you get on with your meeting. Thank you for your time.
So we have a motion on the table that we didn't actually vote on.
Cheers.
About sending the plastic bin.
Let's just do it.
Okay.
If we're all in agreement,
Yeah.
we
We
can
made a
refer.
motion, you seconded.
I did.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Done.
I move the consent agenda.
Can we
All in favor?
step in advance?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Well, no, we have a meeting the night before yours.
Yeah.
We just met last night. So
But I mean, if you know something, if you know you're going to make a presentation, we all have to have our agenda items in Thursday prior to the
well, I can
meeting.
get you the agenda for the meeting we're about to have. But if we have a meeting on Tuesday night, I can try to get you stuff the morning of your meeting. But that's about the best I can do.
I don't know that there was anything that we presented tonight that was different than.
No, well,
But
we manage.
moving forward in the future, I
Yeah.
understand the concern.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm a volunteer, but I'm going to take payment. Thanks. Good night.
Now, I don't believe there's anything left to do with the housing law except set a public hearing. We've already declared lead agency and the EAF.
Just a minute.
And,
Yes. On the public housing law?
Will
Right.
it send the
Housing
correct version
standards.
today?
Housing standard.
Housing standards.
We'll set the correct version
We
this morning.
all got, as you know, there was a problem because Will was working with the wrong draft.
And he sent the right one this morning.
Okay, now he sent the right one. But there are just two things that I found that wasn't Will's fault. This is a while ago that we agreed to have in. The new owner, we're in 129.7C. The new owner, if the property is to be rented, somebody might buy a rental and intend to keep it as a single-family house. And we need to grant that. I mean, the new owner doesn't have to be compliant unless
So-
he's going to rent it.
Whenever ownership of rental property is transferred, if it,
Just say, at the last sentence, Jason, under C, the new owner, if the property is to be rented, shall be liable for compliance. Okay. And 129.8C, we agreed to drop the last sentence.
Not the whole notwithstanding?
Because we've already got it up on the top. Notwithstanding the foregoing in the event of a change of ownership, that's to be dropped because it's already been addressed and we just addressed it again. So that's redundant.
oh, I see, yeah.
Okay, those are my only changes, except I have just one question that never got answered the last time. I'm a property owner and I want to rent, or I am currently renting. The way this law is right now, are we saying I cannot rent until my property is inspected?
Correct.
Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
Then that means no one can rent a property right now for the fall until it's inspected.
No, well, the grandfathered in.
Can't be grandfathered in. Not the way this is written.
Yes, the way this is written is, that's a question for Will.
Okay, well, I asked that question last time and I'm asking it again.
Can you email him tomorrow and copy all of us?
Hmm?
Can you email Will and copy us?
Sure.
That question?
All right, so I'll table this till the next meeting.
I have one more thing.
What's that?
129-11. I was looking at it the last time and just couldn't quite get there. Under B, we changed the order of the bulleting. And B has a 1 but no 2. Anytime you have a bulleting, you need a 1 to a 2, a B to an A. So I feel that sentence, that probably B should just be that complete wording.
Yeah, just take out the one dot and
Yep.
Yes.
eliminate the semicolon and move the rest of it up.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Good.
So those changes, we'll wait to hear back from this question from Will, and I'll table.
Well, no, my question I will email Will,
Right.
but,
Table this to the next meeting then.
but Alberta is making a note to change and add the other stuff.
Do you want me to hand this to you?
This, if you remember, I was asking the question about internal consistency last time, and I think we're gonna have a problem with that, in that there are people who have 2-year leases, so they're already rented.
But they're inspected annually.
Yes, but the way this is written, I can't rent
Well,
until I'm
see what
inspected.
Will says.
Okay.
All right. Let me knock out the two things I think are easy ones. Jump down to number 6. I'll move the resolution numbers in new business.
Second.
Nancy wrote.
Second.
Any discussion?
Is everybody on here that's supposed to be on?
Yeah, as far as I know.
Because some of us aren't on it, and we don't need to be on, do we?
No.
Okay, so these are only people who are right now paying into the retirement system?
Should be, yes.
Okay, second?
All in favor?
Aye.
And I'll move to approve the girls' contract.
Second.
Any discussion?
What are you moving?
The girls, the filming of the girls.
Oh, yes, I'll second.
Okay.
But
All in
let's do
favor?
it, but can we do it by resolution?
Rebecca already seconded.
We need to do it, I think it's a contract, we need to do it by resolution.
It's fine.
Okay, I move the resolution. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
It's a roll call vote
Yes.
on a resolution.
Does any?
I vote aye.
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 There. All right, I don't know what to do with the local law and seeker. There's a FOIL request which is irrelevant to the matter of the law. It's just the law firm has foiled it. What would the rest of you like to do with this law? We have our planner is in favor of it, our attorney is in favor of it, the EPC is in favor of it, the planning board and county planning board think it's too burdensome. What are your opinions?
I've requested an executive session on this topic because the board did not know that it has been foiled on this topic. I did not know until this evening, and in fact, the clerk is with us and she brought her notebook, and I would like an executive.
How is that relevant to the discussion of the law?
Because I think that it is an issue of potential litigation, so I want it discussed in executive session.
Okay, okay, is there a second?
Are we going into executive session now? Sure, second.
All right. I'm gonna vote no because I don't think it bears on the discussion of the law. I think it's just a FOIL request is a FOIL request. Doesn't change my opinion.
Can we have a discussion of the motion now?
Yeah. That's what we're doing.
So
The
what,
motion to go into executive session is not debatable. Just vote it up, vote it down.
is not discussable?
It's not debatable.
It's not, I'm asking for discussion.
Motion to adjourn is not debatable. Motion to go into executive session.
I have requested an executive session.
And the
on
motion's
potential
been made and
litigation.
seconded.
And it's been made and seconded.
And now there's discussion.
Why can't there be
How
discussion?
can you discuss an issue of potential litigation?
No, I'm discussing the relationship of the FOIL to the current law.
But we don't know what the FOIL is, do we? No.
Tom, say your piece.
I don't know, I did see that there is a FOIL request. I don't have any idea what I have to do about it, so I might like to go into executive session. If, however, this particular law could be passed without compromising or without affecting the FOIL request, I want to know if that's the case.
I don't know, and we won't know till executive session.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor of executive session?
Aye.
Nay? Did everyone vote?
I didn't vote.
I didn't vote.
Well, you need to vote. You need to vote.
All right, I will vote aye with the hope that we will have a very quick executive session.
Okay, aye. And I would like to invite the clerk into executive session. Not the deputy clerk, but the clerk.
Once you finish executive session, what else is going to be discussed? The chicken law is the only thing left on our agenda.
And executive session.
And possibly the law.
Right. Well, the topic that we're on now.
We can instruct the attorney to
Did we move
do
on to
seeker.
executive session?
Yes.
Yeah.
Are we doing seeker now?
Yeah, what do we want to do with seeker law?
I would like to table seeker until we can have some answers to some questions.
What are the questions?
The question, it is my understanding that when the Hudsonia report, and I don't know because I haven't checked it, and it was just alleged that the planning board in 2006-07 rejected the Hudsonia report.
And you're gonna find out whether that's true?
I'm gonna have to find out, yes. I'll go look at planning board minutes.
And because that would mean the map was false, is what you're saying?
Well, it seems to me if that report was rejected and the map that is being attached to the law that you are proposing is a part of that report, then I may or may not have a problem. But I'd like to know if, in fact, it was rejected, why it was.
Well, the planning board doesn't reject these reports.
Well,
It would have been presented to the village board, not the planning board.
Yeah, I guess that is one question I would have. So I'm not sure what it would mean that the planning board would reject something.
Well, they may have said, we're not going to take it into consideration at all
Okay.
when we evaluate a project. I don't know what it means, other than I think we ought to check. And I will check if that's what we want to do.
All right, so
I have no knowledge of this.
Override the village board. When does the planning board override the village board?
When does it?
Yes.
Well, it would seem to me that if the planning board is the one that approves projects based on environmental issues and other things, and they approve a project saying that the objections raised are not appropriate, then I would say the planning board that would be their job.
Yeah, I mean, the planning board has rights and authority to do stuff that we just don't have a right to do.
Right.
But that's different from overruling
Right, exactly.
the
That's my point.
the village board.
That's my point.
Their actions are in a different realm or scope than ours.
Well, I don't really want to hold this up. I think that we can get the information that Sally's looking for as we move forward on this.
So what would you like to do? Set a public hearing?
Yes.
Well, if we can set the public hearing,
Yeah.
and we would still get the information
Right.
that, Sally, I would be happy to help you with for this. We could still get the information that we want to have before the public hearing would be held.
Well, I just think in light of that new statement, in light of the fact that the county planning board has not favored this idea and our own planning board does not favor this idea, and I'm not a planner, I'm
Planner
concerned.
does favor it though.
I am concerned, and I would like to have more answers than I have right now.
Well, we can
I mean, the county planning board's their recommendation to me is not something that I would take because of the things that I said last time in terms of like the language they use with exploring alternatives, and I would like to see something that has teeth. But so I don't think that that's the reason not to move forward. I think my question last time was about what George Bodenhausen said. And my question was, why is this, where is it? It says it in here. Basically said that this would be something that is challengeable.
Everything is challengeable.
Right, but I understand anything can be challenged, but if an attorney says that this in particular is something that would be challenged, I want to know more about why.
Well, I don't know why he said that. I know that both of the things, the major points in this law are standard parts of state secret law. critical environmental areas and local type 1 actions. We already have 3 or 4 local type 1 actions already on the books. So it's really, the only thing that's unique about this is that it's protecting wetlands. As opposed
No,
to,
it's doing more than protecting wetlands. It's saying anything, first of all, a lot of these things have already been done. Montague View is done.
That's why they're not on the map.
Stoneley Woods has been bought by the town. Woodland Pond is a done deal with 80 land, 80. This map is so outdated it doesn't even include the Niffen annexation.
You say things like this as if it's true, no matter how many times you're proven wrong. This is not an old, outdated map. This is a relatively new map, as 2 successive planners have explained to you. You don't get much more recent than this. And to keep saying it's an old, outdated map is just inaccurate.
This is not my issue because I think we talked about this last time where we could do a parallel track of getting this map updated if we so choose. And I'm completely in favor of updating the map I think we should update the map generally speaking, and I think that with the increased amounts of rain that we have, we probably should update the map because I would say our climate has changed since then. But my question, what I would like to go back to is George Rodenhausen saying that the simplest approach would be to state that any project that would disturb the land within 100 feet of a state or federal wetland or perennial or intermittent streams is type 1 action. And I just wonder why you don't want to do that.
Because this map does more than that, because there are very few state or federal wetlands. This identifies all state, federal, and local wetlands. So it does everything George is saying, only add local to that list. And we know that there are local wetlands because we paid our son in the map.
All right, that is actually a very, very good explanation.
Thank you. So we're doing like 90% of what George is recommending.
I'm in favor of it.
All right, so I'll move we set a public hearing for our next meeting at 7:30.
We have one on the books already, say following the other public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I'm opposed.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
And we can always keep the hearing open, remember, as
Yes.
new information comes up. All right, and hopefully...
I would like to see us update this map.
it's fairly expensive to do. It was like $15,000 to do it.
I mean, it might take us...
We need to get a grant or something.
Yeah, I mean, it'll take us time to do it, but I would like to see it done.
Could you just does this mean that the area that we are sitting in?
I'm going to move that we keep the chicken law as it is.
Means you got to check.
You got to check.
Check to make sure.
I don't think they heard you.
All right, so the changes to the chicken law were, I asked Will to draft some. Any comments?
I don't understand, Jason, why after all of the discussion that we had month after month after month and finally agreed on a law, now you want to change it again.
Because as I explained at the beginning, well, a lot of these were Will's changes. He wanted to because remember this is a different attorney that we dealt with at the time. The main concern I wanted to have was that removing the acreage requirement from the local law and instead having it rely on setbacks for accessory uses. Since a chicken, basically, I wanted to have a law that was more like Kingston or Beacon's law or New York City's law that actually allowed people to have chickens in small spaces.
And I actually, I like this idea because I've spoken with people who would like to have chickens and cannot because they don't have half an acre. However, I do feel that it's important because part of the research that I did when we had the original chicken law is that chickens are sold and kept in flocks of 6. And I think it's important if we're looking at humanely raising chickens to keep that number in there. And it's not about I can have one chicken if I have this much space and 2 chickens for this much space. If I have to be able to have 6 chickens, which is why we went with the half an acre. But I do also recognize that some people might have, like I do, a very small house on
And you
more
can get
land.
less chickens.
You
apparently.
can't have less than 6 chickens.
I know someone in Kingston has 3.
Then
But they're
they
not-
should be
that's
reported.
not- it's not about who we know that has less chickens. It's about that they're sold in flock of 6 and they're meant to be kept that way.
So what do you want to do with this law?
So what I would like to do is put language in there that in D2A, you know, in terms of like the minimum space, I guess we could add something there about, you know, a minimum of 6. A minimum of 6 chickens shall be kept and provided a minimum of 3 square feet of food space of 10 square feet. I think that could make it work.
What do the rest of you think?
So you're agreeing that it should be a minimum of 6, area?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's not something
Why
that
don't we
I
just-
just have a personal tie to.
Why don't we just add a new 2E? The minimum number of chickens shall be 6.
Sure.
And I hate
Oh,
to...
wait. 1.
Not gonna
the
do
number
it.
of animals shall be limited as follows. We should just say.
Okay, so
Put it in
a
there.
new C. Okay, so 1C. Are you getting this, Alberta? And is that it?
Well,
one
did
other
you...
thing is-
What about Bren's recommendations?
What are they? I don't have them in front of me.
Yeah, I don't either.
I do.
And that-
They weren't taken into account in Will's draft?
Her one question is that section 4C4 should read, the fence and/or structure does not exceed 5 feet in height.
Oh, no, that was taken out. I remember reading something about fencing. Fence height is already governed by another section of the code.
Right.
Did you get Bren's change? Do you agree to it?
It's already dealt with in another
Well,
section.
there's, in the red line here, it says,
I don't
fence
have-
height already governed by another section.
What
of the
red
code.
line do you have?
On the margin notes.
It's, well, there's
We have 2 different.
yeah, there's the law, and then underneath it is the red line version. It should be page 530. Oh, wait, no, 5-4. 5-4.
I do, again, please ask that in the future, drafts show as numbers so that people don't have the wrong drafts. That was part of the problem with the housing standard law,
Yeah.
okay? And that's a perfect example. If we change something and it goes to a new draft, that draft should be numbered.
Yeah, we should have footers on our documents. We should have footers on our documents with that
Yep.
information.
Any other changes to the chicken law?
I also thought that in number 4D, Roman number 5, that 7 a.m. should be dawn.
Which one, Ariel? Number 4, what?
D, Roman numeral 5.
Even when it gets
It would
light
be,
at
it would
5
be
a.m.?
light at 5 a.m. and chickens will be,
Well, that's my point. Say I'm a farmer and I'm going to work at 6 a.m. and I want to let my chickens out right before I leave. And it's summertime and it's light at 6 a.m. I think it's perfectly reasonable to let them out at 6 a.m. If that is my my policy,
I'd agree.
personal policy with my chickens.
I'd agree to that.
Because when somebody leaves for work before then and they want to let their
dawn
chickens roam
instead of 7 a.m.
You need to say dusk till dawn.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Mhm.
Change 7 a.m. to dawn.
Yeah.
And that's not gonna make too many people happy, but
I appreciate that.
I think-
Roosters are not allowed.
you
but
are gonna have difficulty
But
with that.
The cooping of the
How
chickens
much-
is for the chicken safety, not
I hate
for
to tell you,
people's
but when you have
pleasure.
6 little chickens, you don't know which one's the rooster.
Well, yes, well,
No, you don't.
I
Not
look-
until they
You
grow
can
up.
tell by
I
their
took care
feathers.
of 4,000
Not babies.
chickens.
Okay. What else? What else?
When they grow
It's
up,
getting
take
late.
care of them.
What else?
Those are my chickens.
Any other changes? Then hearing none, I'd like to set a public hearing for this law as well, as amended, following the last public hearing.
Second.
All, any discussion? All in favor?
Opposed, because I still think a half acre should be required.
Okay. I'll move to adjourn.
Okay. All right. I wanted to bring up one.
Second.
All in favor?
I want Rebecca to explain that before we
Yes,
adjourn.
yes, I'm sorry. We've been meeting with the web designer. He's met with Jason and I 3 times. He has met with Katie several times, and just today he and I and Katie met with Bren from the building department, and he toured the facilities once again. One of the things that he brought up, which is going to be one of the security things he'll be dealing with, is that first of all, there are users attached to our website, and there have also been visits to our websites from what look like non-human visitors, entities from different countries, Japan, China, Europe, some .NET icons. But anyway, his whole point was that in terms of whoever is posting things to the website, that if this activity is going on, it could appear as if you've posted something when you actually haven't, because the website has been slowed down by this activity. And that, I just wanted to make that known, just
Some of our
because.
website problems are because of hackers.
Yes, or attempted hacks.
But Rebecca,
But-
what does that mean for us?
What that means for us is some of the issues that I believe, and this is what Brendan said, he feels that some of the issues that Katie has had with posting materials has been due to this activity, where she thinks something posted and then it didn't in actuality because of this activity.
You mean somebody was able to prevent it?
The
Because,
traffic prevented it.
yes, yeah. So,
Okay.
but just to clear up that one thing that came out of some of the meetings we've been having. But-
So I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We did. I think I